The largest Gen Z protest took place in Nepal in September and led to the resignation of the Prime Minister there. Since then, Gen Z activists have led protest movements in Peru, Morocco, Madagascar, Indonesia, the Philippines, Kenya, and now Mexico, just to name a few. Afshin Molavi is a senior fellow with the Foreign Policy Institute at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. He's also founder of the emerging World newsletter on Substack. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you.
So we're seeing major Gen Z-led protests from Mexico to Nepal, across Peru, Morocco, Madagascar, Indonesia, and Kenya. Just what ties these movements together, and why is this generation rising up now?
It's very interesting, these movements, because when we think of youth-led protest movements, we often think of the young man or the young woman carrying the placard for freedom or for liberty. And certainly there's an element of that there. But there's also an element of people not chanting necessarily, give me liberty or give me death, but they're saying, give me electricity, offer me better opportunities. Please have a government that is less corrupt, that is more responsive. Now, I realize those don't fit very well on a placard, but these themes of economic security and grievance and this generalized disenchantment with ruling elites and the establishment spread across all of these Gen Z protest movements. It's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, so they're not classic freedom movements, but certainly demands for economic dignity and trying to hold governments to account. Just what makes this message from this Gen Z movement different from sort of protests that we've seen in the past?
Yeah, I think that's really, what's extraordinary about these movements is that, these young people, they're not calling for a new ism. These are not utopian ideals that they're calling for. They're actually calling for a sense of normalcy. As you said, economic dignity, more opportunity, affordability in both their life and affordability in education. And Lynda, we need to be listening to these voices, because these voices are early warning systems for all of us around the world. Because while we've seen these many of these Gen Z protest movements in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East, but many of these same grievances exist in the United States, in Europe as well, among Gen Z. And we're going to see it going forward as well.
So, Afshin, just elaborate on that for us. When you say we should listen to the warning signals, we're listening. Like, how do we respond? I mean, what are the next steps?
Well, when you look at some of the demands, the demands are for, greater economic dignity, more job opportunities, more education. Now, governments, in terms of their next steps, generally speaking, the movements see governments as either unable to meet these needs, inept, or at worst corrupt. And so governments are going to have to respond to this. And the best way to respond to this is to create enabling environments, create environments where there's more opportunity, create affordable education opportunities. The challenge, Lynda, is going to be that these protests are happening in the age of AI, a time when even with you have greater education, there's going to be more job losses. We're living in a very important transitional moment, and this is happening at a time where we're going to see even more job losses than we would have otherwise.
And potentially more inequality. So just explain for us, Afshin, how Gen Z protesters are organizing across borders, and to what extent these movements are learning from each other, inspiring one another.
Absolutely. This is, one of the most connected. This is the most connected generation in human history. These are digital natives who grew up with smartphones, who grew up with social media. They are using these social media tools to organize, but also to amplify their messages. Now, you have to go back to there's traditional, social organizing and political organizing to go out into the streets as well. But what they're also doing is they're borrowing memes and symbols and icons across these borders. There's one, prominent one, the Jolly Roger. It's that pirate skull that is in a Japanese manga comic strip, and it was an anime series as well. And you see that appear in Indonesia, and you see that appear in Madagascar, and you see that appear across these Gen Z protest movements. So there's these shared grievances as well as these shared memes. But the one key point to note here is that with globalization, expectations have risen, but opportunity has not. And this is the central challenge that governments are going to face, is that as expectations rise and as they are unmet in times where people have greater access to information, more education, this is where the real challenge is going to lie in the future. And we're going to see more of this instability going forward, not less.
Such an interesting discussion, and great to connect those dots. Afshin Molavi, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.